Well, hey guys, Thorzax here. I got a small video here because I wanted to go ahead and I want to tell you a little story about my first rifle. Now, my first rifle was a single shot 22 that belonged to my grandfather. And he handed it down to my dad, and my dad handed it down to me. I still have it today, and it is a family heirloom. I never shoot it. However, what I want to go over is a little history about that rifle. Okay, now as you guys know, I'm Norwegian. Okay, and those of you that have maybe had a different opinion of mine, or maybe a different outlook of mine, or something like that, and we got into sort of like a trade of words about it. You got to remember, I'm a square-headed, lutefisk-eating, slow-minded Norwegian. Okay, and I'm proud of that. Okay, that's it. I mean, that's just the way I am. So anyway, what you're looking at here, okay, this is what they called at the time. These were foraging ships, okay, that were out here on the Pacific coast around the turn of the century, up until about 1935, 1940. And what these ships were used for, because of the age of steam, steamships started coming into, the trade, and which rapidly replaced these old sailing ships. And what they called these ships were down-eastern ships, okay, or downwinders. And as you can see, they had an awful lot of sail area. They would catch the wind. They would come down, from the eastern winds, and they would catch that. And these ships were extremely fast, and they were great foraging ships. They were made to haul cargo, people, equipment, lumber, whatever. And they were utilized out here on the Pacific coast for many years to support the industry in Alaska of salmon fishing. And my grandfather, that when he immigrated here from Norway, he ended up having to spend some time in the Midwest. He had to pay his passage. That was an agreement that he had with a farmer there. And then he came out here to Seattle. Now, there was only, like two industries that were really booming at that time. One of them was fishing, and the other one was logging. So if you didn't know English and you only spoke Norwegian, you wanted to go to a place where you could get along and make a living. And that's where he got started. That's how my family ended up here. So the bottom line is that these ships, okay, were the backbone of, the APA, which was the Alaskan Packers Association, and they bought these ships. It was the largest fleet on the Pacific coast for up until about 1940, when the steam age really started getting in there. More modern equipment, more efficiency. They just couldn't operate these at a profit anymore. The one thing, though, about steamships, those they require maintenance, they require engineers, they require a lot of things that a sailing ship doesn't. This ship here could be laid up in port for like 6 months. You don't have to maintenance anything. You just, before you take the ship out, you make sure it's ship shape, make sure all your blocks and your tackle and everything works, and you go sailing. And I'm going to tell you what, if you've ever been out there in the Pacific Ocean, these guys were men, okay? And we're going to go out there and we're going to be men about sailing. And, the skippers on the captains on these boats, they had kahunas. I mean, they went out there during the winter months and they sailed these ships into Alaska. And I'll tell you what, I've been there. And hats off. It wouldn't be me out there on this. Believe me. As you can see, this is a very old handmade model. This is a handmade model. As you can see, some of the rigging has broke on it. I I would imagine this is more than 100 years old, and it was something that my grandfather had made when he was in Alaska. He made this, and this was either this was the ship that he came over here on, or this was the ship that he went to Alaska on all the time. So anyway, I wanted to share that with you. I mean, there was a lot of Scandinavians at that time: Finns, Swedes, Norwegians. They left Scandinavia at that time because the Red Army was getting stronger. Because even before the Soviets took over, I mean, there was a lot of unrest in Russia, and then Russia also had this connection with Finland. Okay, if you notice something about Finland, Finland was the Karelian dynasty. Those guys there, they ruled all through Russia. So everything that you see in Russia is just downriver Finland. Their architecture, their music, their language, all that stuff comes from Finland. It comes from Finland. It was standardized in Finland and passed down through Russia. So anyway, to make a long story short, I'm not a historian. I mean, but those immigrants that came here knew that there was unsettlement and unrest. Also, economically at that time, you just couldn't make it in Scandinavia, so they left. They left. They took their chances. They put their shoes on, their pants on, their shirt on. They packed a little duffel bag. They got on these ships and they came over here with nothing, no guarantee, no nothing. And they started their lives. So, anyway, that's a little bit about my history. I look at this and I feel really proud, that really took some kahunas. He was 15 years old, and his father came up to him and told him, pack your bags and get out of here, because we don't know what's going to happen. And this is before World War One. So anyway, it's like I said, this model actually, there's some restoration that I'd like to do to this. I'd like to fix that rigging that's broken right there. There's also another one that's broken right here. The glass is cracked. This has been sitting out in the garage forever. But I do want to put new glass on it. I want to clean it out. I want to take a very small vacuum that's used for models and get all the little lid bugs and stuff like that out of there and clean it up really good. But like I said, this is a family heirloom. This take a lot of pride in this. Like I said, it's more than 100 years old. Pretty wild. Yeah, these ships were extremely fast. A lot of sail area. But this, you got to understand another thing too. The men that sailed these ships left Seattle, okay, and then they went to Alaska. Then they fished Alaska, and then they came and sailed the ship back with a full load of canned fish. That's back when they started discovering canning and they could preserve the fish. It was non-perishable, and they could load the boat with that and take it back. But so it kind of had a double occupation, more or less. Or you would get on the boat, you would run the boat, okay, and be a crew hand, sail the ship up there, maybe work in a cannery, or go out there and actually catch the fish, which what my grandfather did, and then you would take the cargo, load the boat, and head back down to Seattle. So that was basically his career. Anyway, I wanted to share that with you. Yeah, I'll tell you, this is what put Seattle on the map. This right here. There was logging and fishing. And, this is what was the mainstay. This reached farther than logging. This was international trade. Even the Japanese, the Chinese, anywhere that people were in need of protein, fish was the staple for that. So, yeah. Anyway. So anyway, this is Thor's Axe. Wanted to share that with you. It really isn't a firearm video. The one thing I will say about the firearm is that my grandfather, okay, when they would go ahead and they'd purseine, say for coho or pinks, red salmon, what they would do is they would go ahead and they would get their nets out there, but they would get a couple of seals in there. Now, one thing that the seals will do once they get in your net, they're a menace. They'll start eating up all the fish, and you can't just go out in there in a little dory or something like that and net them and take them out of the net. You shot them. And that's exactly what he did with that 22. You just went out there with your, you went over the rail here and you just pow, you shot them, and that's it. And then you dragged in your nets. That's what they did in order to protect their livelihood. So. Say what you want about, people protecting all the critters that live out there in the ocean. But, there's a certain amount of need that man needs. And unfortunately, the wildlife get in the way sometimes. Not that anybody wants to wipe out the wildlife either. That's another thing, too. One thing that happened on the East Coast, they got in the New England area and whatnot. Actually, a lot of these ships came from New England. They would sail between Europe and the East Coast. Anyway, where was I? One thing that they learned about the East Coast. Now, when the East Coast really was in the heyday, they were kind of like the fish market, breadbasket of the world. But the problem was that a lot of those fishermen, they were greedy. And what they did is they felt that a man should be able to just go out there and catch as much fish as he wants, whenever he wants, and that's up to his living, and that's it. It's make as much money as you can. And you know what? They decimated, they annihilated the salmon runs, and they annihilated the cod runs. And it's going to take a long time for the East Coast to recover from that. So they're having to manage over there right now the damage they did. Now, one thing about the Alaskan fisheries is they've went into quotas now, and it's a finely balanced thing of managing, the wild caught salmon, the halibut, the cod, the crab, all the rest of that stuff, and they balance that so that it's a renewable source. It's a perpetual source that they can rely on. And I'm going to tell you what, 200 years from now, they'll still be, catching fish in Alaska. So, anyway, that's my deal. That pretty much takes care of my video. So, anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. This is Thor's Axe. I'm signing out.